It shows we are out for something very unique today. Please, the internet is a bit fluctuating. If you just allow me, just turn the video off for a second, just so it's not interrupted. I hope you don't mind that. But good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this webinar. Um, I know the moderator, Dr. Ian, we get to set a context for the conversation. But just to say, the title of the webinar itself, Democracy in Motion, Honoring the Past, Securing the Future, kind of raises some kind of consciousness, that as we are reflecting on the Nigeria's democratic journey, we must also begin by honoring the courage and the sacrifices of those who stood firm in the face of military oppression at the time. By that, I mean the pro-democracy activists, civil society leaders, journalists, even students and everyday citizens who kind of resisted the dictatorship. And this so not merely to end the regime per se, but to get a new political order, one that is rooted in the rule of law, in accountability, or in participatory governance, and of course, ultimately in civic freedoms. Their bravery actually laid foundation for the democratic space that we occupy today. But sadly, despite the sacrifices of these noble men and women that have earned their name in Nigeria history, which involved some of them even paying the ultimate price with their lives, Nigeria still continue to, navigate these hostile spaces for expression and organizing, with a very rising authoritarian tendencies as we see it today. The basis of democratic processes, as we know itself, is the election itself. But too often, this has been overshadowed by dashed hopes and dashed expectations, as electoral manipulations and even the elite dominance has kind of taken away the shine of the whole process, while citizens are just left to struggle to see their voices truly reflected in the process. So I think perhaps it is time for us as Nigerians to begin to truly reflect on our democratic journey, to identify, the drive for a change of a system of government that around this democracy. And we must realize that it is only by standing together as citizens that we can actually achieve that we can safeguard the freedoms that have been so fought for and so hard won. And so on that, as I said, I will allow Dr. Ian do the scene setting later. But let me, on behalf of the Executive Director of Global Right, say welcome to all of you. And I will emphasize at this point that the democracy that we are still talking about is actually not a destination. It is a constant act of, our collective courage. And so let me thank our esteemed speakers, I will allow, and who has accepted to lead the conversation today. But I will allow the moderator to introduce them and read their profile out clearly. But I can see in the room, uh, Professor Chidi Odekalu, thank you for joining us, sir. Thank you, sir. And of course, the very seasoned Dr. Ian, who is steering the conversation as the moderator for today's event. Thank you, Dr. Ian, for agreeing to do this. So again, I will say welcome, everybody, and let's just get it all started. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Edosa. It's great to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you all for joining this conversation, a conversation on protecting the civic space, democracy in action, in motion, honoring the past and securing the future. Edosa has already set the stage, so I don't know what he's talking about. But anyway, this conversation is a very important one. 32 years post the 1993 elections, quite a lot has happened, of course, with the democracy coming back into Nigeria from 1999, 26 years of that. What has the journey been? How has it been? What do we need to work on? And speaking about the civic space, how open is this space to everyone? That is the conversation we're having at present. And I am so honored to be a part of this amongst a group, a team of erudite Nigerians who have been passionate about the affairs of Nigeria. And I believe who may be saddened a bit by how things have gone, and of course, look forward to things getting better as the days go by. That's the essence of this conversation today. Of course, we have a mix of the old, the not so old, the young, not so young. It's a whole gamut, it's a whole mix. And we look forward to hearing everyone's views, sharing our thoughts on June 12th, sharing how it has been, sharing a bit about the civic space and indeed how open it is to everyone. And of course, looking ahead to what we desire for our dear country, Nigeria. So I'm going to go straight on to introduce our panelists for today. Who are, I believe, all here by now. I would begin with Professor Chidi Anselm Odinkalu, who is a professor of practice in international human rights law at the Fletcher School and currently chairs Nigeria's Truth, Justice, and Peace Commission. He's a former chairperson of the Governing Council of Nigeria's National Human Rights Commission and played a key role in negotiating the Gambia's return to the Commonwealth. He's an expert in African human rights systems and has litigated landmark cases before regional courts and contributed to the establishment of the African Court on Human and People's Rights. He collaborates with organizations such as the International Refugee Rights Initiative, focusing on governance, on justice, and, multilateralism. He is the co-author of Too Good to Die, a 2018 book, a critical examination of African leadership, and his career bridges the academia, advocacy, and institutional reform in the advancement of human rights and transitional justice across Africa. It's great to have you here, Prof. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. I'd also like to welcome Mr. Jide Ojo, who is a seasoned development consultant and public affairs analyst with academic training in political science from the Universities of Lagos and Ibadan. Now, since 1998, he has worked with both local and international NGOs, including the UNDP and USAID on governance, elections, and development. He has trained election management bodies, political actors, and civil society organizations and has served as an international election observer. He's a prolific writer. He has authored over 400 opinion pieces in Nigerian newspapers and contributed chapters to several books on democracy and public policy. Okujide, it's good to have you here. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation.
It's my pleasure. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon to you. I'd also like to introduce the great Oracle. Okay, I think that should actually be his first name before we get to Mr. Abdul Mahmoud. Anyway, he is a Nigerian lawyer, he's a poet, and he is a renowned human rights advocate, known for his incisive social commentary and activism. As president of the Public Interest Lawyers League, that's the PILL, he leads initiatives aimed at defending vulnerable groups, promoting democracy, and advancing public interest law. He is a former student union leader during the dark days of the military dictatorship and also writes poetry under the pen name Obemata. I hope I got that right. With his works translated into Polish, Lithuanian, and French, his work seamlessly integrates law, literature, and social justice. Mr. Abdul Mahmoud, aka the Great Oracle, great to have you here, sir. You're welcome.
Thanks for having me. Good afternoon.
And I'd like to introduce one who is a distinguished Nigerian human rights lawyer and democracy advocate. She previously led the Civil Liberties Organization and played a key role actually, in the struggle for the recognition of MKO Abiola's annulled mandate. She chaired the Transition Monitoring Group and served on the Police Service Commission. Now, currently a partner in the Lagos-based law firm, she advises the Gori Institute and the International Crisis Group. She is a former chair of the steering committee of the World Movement for Democracy and has participated in major global democracy and human rights forums. She remains a respected voice in Nigeria's human rights and governance reform landscape. Please join me to welcome Ms. Ayo Obe. Great to have you here, ma'am. We're so honored to have you.
Thank you for the invitation.
I would also like to welcome Ms. Nafisa Atiku Adejuwon. I hope Nafisa is here now as a panelist. She's a passionate advocate for women's empowerment in international development with a focus on governance, education, and sustainability. She's a trained lawyer with certification in gender and development and has worked with institutions such as AUD and the Ford Foundation to promote diversity and inclusion. She has cultivated inclusive platforms where young women can connect, collaborate, and lead. A 2024 Mandela Washington Fellow and Kul Shekia Fellow, I hope I got that right. Nafisa currently serves as Executive Director of the NAF Foundation for Young Women, helping transform women into leaders and change makers across Africa. You're welcome, Nafisa. Great to have you on this call.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic. And finally, I hope he is here right now, Mr. Lanre Arogundade, a veteran journalist, press freedom advocate, and the executive director of the International Press Center, IPC, in Nigeria. Now, he gained prominence as a fearless reporter during Nigeria's military regimes and the transition to democracy. His outspoken journalism earned him a place on the Department of State Services, that's the DSS watch list, from which he was only recently removed after more than 2 decades. Arogundade is also an author, he's a media trainer, he's a researcher who continues to champion freedom of the press and media development in Nigeria and beyond. Ogalanre, I hope you're here. Thank you so much for joining in. Right. I am sure we'll get to him as soon as possible. But just to, draw up a few ground rules as we get into this conversation, the first question definitely will have everyone contribute about 2 to 3 minutes each, since we are actually pressed on time. And we hope to be done with this in good enough time so everyone can get back to other matters. But our very first question, where I expect, 2-minute answers from everyone, I hope we'll be able to get that story out in 2 minutes, especially as it relates to June 12. When you remember June 12, what does it mean to you? I mean, this is a question to you personally. I mean, take us back to that moment where you were. I think I was just, I was getting into SS3 at that time. Yeah, SS3 at that time. So it has been a long time for me. But what about you? Where were you? What did it feel like? What was happening around you? And why does that day continue to hold so much importance for Nigeria along this democratic journey? Professor Odinkalu, can we begin with you, please? Over. Professor Odinkalu. Okay, so let's hold on a bit. I'm sure we'll get Prof in very, very shortly. But Mr. Jide Ojo, let me get back to you with this same question. What does June 12 mean to you? In 2 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy New Week. I've chronicled my thoughts on June 12 in my column last Wednesday on June 11, 2025. Where I recall that I was an undergraduate student at University of Lagos at that time, and I joined the protest on Ikorodu Road as undergraduate students, we were on street protesting the annulment of the elections. I was also writing for different newspapers as far back as 1990. I've written over 2,000 commentaries in over 17 newspapers, with some of them chronicling my thoughts on June 12th. I recall that I wrote a piece that was meant to be read on OGBC FM Mailbag 2084. That was a prime radio station in Abeokuta, Ogun State. That station had to be shut down because of the criticism some of us who were writing in were leveled against the military junta. So it's surreal for me because shut down. Were kept at home for months. Some of our colleagues were named in the shootout with Abacha, killer squad who were deployed to stop the protest across the country. And I was just lucky to escape. As undergraduate students, our Luther blood was very hot in us. But looking back over 32 years, it's so disappointing that we are not where we ought to be. The sacrifices made by students, by unionists like Franco Correa and the entire labor union structures then, the sacrifices of Nigerian media, some of whom were murdered, like Alda Kato, and then those who were hunted into exile. I recall Kunle Ajibade, a prominent journalist, was jailed for life, and he had to recount his experience in a book titled Jailed for Life. So many people were hunted into exile. We recall the establishment of Radio Kudirat, which is synonymous to what IPOB is trying to do under Mazin Nnamdi Kanu, trying to set up online radio, and all the pressures that were mounted by the international community, US government, Canada, and several other Western countries. They mounted pressure on the president, on General Sani Abacha, who took office on November 17, 1993, after pushing out Chief Ernest Shonekan, who was installed as the head of interim government of Nigeria after Babangida stepped aside on August 27, 1993.
Yeah. All right, thank you so much, Okajide, for taking us through your journey and your story as it relates to June 12, 1993, and the emotions and all that it evokes for you. The great oracle, would you want to just jump in here and just add your voice to what June 12 means to you, particularly as a student
Yes,
union leader at the time?
yeah, thanks for having me. My sense of remembering would be at two levels. Said I should start my video. I'm having connection problems, so starting the video will be a problem.
That's just fine.
Will be at two levels. One personal and the other at the level of the collective. At the personal, let me use this opportunity to thank two individuals here who are part of the panel, Ms. Ayobe and Chidi Odinkalu. Chidi will recall that in 1991, he had the fortune of reaching out my late colleague, Bamidele Atubu, while we were in detention at the maximum security prison in Kiri. Ourselves in prison at the time, because as president of the National Association of Nigerian Students, I led the national protest against the then transition program of General Ibrahim Babangida. And he felt it was necessary for him to arrest me and 7 others, detain us in Kirikiri and Ikoyi prison under the dreaded state security and detention of persons decree number 2 of 1984. Fast forward in 1996, with reference to what Julia has mentioned, Radio Kudrat, I had the misfortune of being abducted at the Federal High Court at Abeokuta by operatives of the Directorate of Military Intelligence. Of course, they were confused. They didn't know what to do with me. They decided to put me in a holding cell at the SSS office in Abeokuta. The allegation or the charge at the time was that I was the Professor Mahmoud, who was the reporter on Radio Kudrat. Again, I thank Ayo for her intervention. So something instructive happened. The second day after I was detained, the SSS didn't know what to do to me. They released me. On getting home in Ijebu, a new team of DMI officers stormed my house. With the help of the locals, I was able to escape, and I went underground for 6 months. At the level of the collective, I salute the contributions of many Nigerians to the struggle of June 12, and also to the memories of those who have gone ahead, Chima Obani, Bamdele Aturu, and a whole host of activists of repute, at the time. I had just finished my BAC Part 2 exams at the Nigerian Law School in Lagos when the crisis broke out. And as founding vice chairman of the Campaign for Democracy, it became historic for us to be part of the process. Myself and Fabian Okoye, Dr. Omano Digeji, and 6 others were given the task of ensuring that no traffic takes place of Lagos, specifically to women business. A fearsome day of and army officers. Fortunately for us, Carter Bridge into the island, and we didn't lose a single individual on that day. It was a fearsome battle. So looking back, I also have a tinge of regret. The democracy that I thought we were fighting for is not the democracy we have today. What we have is merely civil rule.
Okay.
Again, I want to refer to a very brilliant book by the late Nigerian thinker, late Professor Ake, The Feasibility of Democracy in Africa. He talked about the hollowing out, of democracy and enthroning in its place anti-democratic values. So what we see today with the shrinking of the democratic space, all points to what Ake wrote about 25 years ago. And for me, is a thing of regret. If I died between 1993 and 1999, I would have died for nothing. Died for the enjoyment individuals like Akpabio, now enjoying our country.
You know what? I mean, hearing you say this, with that
of in our country.
Okay.
That's my recollection.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing, Mr. Abdul Mahmoud. I appreciate it. And, hearing you say all of that, what you fought for not really being what you are saying right now, and having that tinge of regret. I'll get back to that question much later, because there's definitely so much to unpack right there in that statement. But let me come to you, Ma'am Ayo Obe, and have your thoughts, your recollection of June 12th, of where you were, what you did. I mean, you had done a whole lot, leading marches, against the military regime and all of that. You had You were there in the forefront of it. So what do you remember? What do you recall? Do you recall everything, or do you also regret like the great oracle? Over.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation to participate in this discussion. You did ask what we actually were doing on June 12th itself. On that day, I had woken with the knowledge that an injunction had been issued by a high court in Abuja to prevent the election from going ahead, but the knowledge that the Electoral Commission was still going to go ahead with the election. So I went out and voted. And this was the first election in which we used the open secret method, which in various ways we have continued to use in Nigeria since then. Open secret is that everything except the casting of your ballot is done in secret, in the open rather, so that you are accredited in the open, you are given your ballot papers in the open, then you go into a secret booth and cast your ballot. And then after that, you come out and put your ballot in the ballot box in the open. Prior to that, we had the queue voting system, which of course did not preserve the secrecy of the vote, so that people had to vote in the open. Now, that was popular with people, and it's often called quote and unquote option A4, but it was challenged on the basis that it didn't preserve secrecy of ballot. So since then, we've used different variations of the open secret system. So I voted, and we were waiting for the results, and eventually we were told that the military dictatorship had stopped the results, that there had been another emergency ruling of a high court and so on and so forth. So that was the actual June 12th. Now, people have also talked about what happened after that. And I at that time was the deputy president of the Civil Liberties Organization, which was led by Olisa Agbakoba. You had Abdul Oro as the executive director, because president, deputy president, voluntary, unpaid positions. And I had Abdul Oro and Chidi Odinkalu to thank for getting me into the position of being deputy president, because they were the ones who persuaded me to join the CL, or to stand for election. But after that, we then had to devise a means by which we would challenge the annulment, or the purported annulment, of the June 12th election result, which was obviously going in the way of Chief Emeka Abiola. And the Campaign for Democracy, of which the CLO was a part, had held various meetings. And at the end of those meetings, we decided that we were going to have a mass demonstration in Lagos. Now, I then lived in Yaba at Queen Street, and I didn't actually take part in the demonstration that took place in July 2023. Campaign for Democracy was led then by Dr. Beko Ransom Kuti. And that demonstration was met with extreme violence by troops under the command of General Sani Abacha, who was commanding the army here in Lagos. And 196 people were killed on the streets of Lagos. And so after that, we decided that we would not give the military easy targets, that we would declare what is known as a ville morte, which is a dead city, that there would be a sit-at-home protest by which nobody would go out. And that would show that the military, that we did not agree with what they were doing. Well, I think people have recounted this story so many times, but I want to say that when the military eventually realized that Sani Abacha was stealing the ship in which they all had their load onto the rocks, and that there was going to be a man overboard, and he fortuitously had some kind of attack of illness when he was eating an apple or some such story. When that happened, and the military wanted to know, should we continue with the Abacha transition or not? And Nigerians said, no, we will not continue with that transition. We then had to think about what we would, how we would respond to even that transition, because we had objected, the human rights community as a whole had objected to the Babangida transition, which was supposed to have culminated on the 12th of June. And most of us, and most human rights activists did not vote because of that principled position. I did vote, but I believed in taking whatever was available if it was available. But the point was that when Abdul Salami now decided to return to civil rule, and having the military struggled to regain control of the process, and one of the ways by which they tried to regain control was, of course, by bringing General Obasanjo out of prison, where Abacha had been keeping him, and persuading him to run for president. And another way by which they tried to maintain control was by making the transition date May 29th rather than June 12th. So when President Buhari now decided to make June 12th Democracy Day, I was one of those who was invited to speak. And I was recently looking at my address on that day, in which I thought I had given a very long list, but obviously I didn't have enough time. But I had listed some of those who had died between that June 12th, 1993 and the June 12th, I think it was 2018 or so. And to just say that these people also deserved recognition. I think that most of them were recently honored in the June 12th honors list that was released recently. But it turns out that when I looked at the list, which I did recently, some of them were not. And I think that when we talk about honoring the past and remembering those who had gone, if you will let me know if I have time to list those names. But let me
we'll
stop.
definitely get to that later. Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your recollection and those deep thoughts. I mean, just taking us through that narrative, that story, and how things happened, and importantly, the lives that were lost. We can never ever forget. But let me turn this to Nafisa right now and find out, Nafisa, where were you on June 12th, 1993, and what is your recollection? What have you heard? What stories have been told? What narratives have you heard? Let's hear from you. Go ahead.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Very. We can hear you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Doctor. Sorry, I might not be able to turn on my video. I'm very wary. Yes, I'm very wary of the network issues because it kept misbehaving in the beginning.
No problem.
Thank you. So first of all, I would like to say thank you to Global Rights for inviting me for this webinar. I would like to thank them for having the foresight to include young voices in a conversation like this in a very pivotal moment in our life, in a very pivotal discussion. Where was I on June 12th, 1993? I was 3 months old, which which is I think it's a factual statement that I wasn't even up to 5-6 months. But my earliest recollection, as I grew up in the 90s, I'm a millennial, was that my mother was very careful of the military regime. We resided in Port Harcourt that time, so she would say some statements. My family was also very politically involved, so she would say some statements and she would say some things, and she wouldn't allow me to go out a lot because she was scared, in the sense that she didn't want us to be too exposed. And then I remember the time when General Sani Abacha passed, and we were driving down the streets, and there was nationwide jubilation, the fact that a military dictator had passed. And from that very early age, I could sense, or at least I could understand, that a military regime is in no way good for Nigeria. Within in whatever shape or form that it chooses to exist, because it might change its name, but the form and the futures can then still transcend into other forms of, governance that we have in the Nigeria today. I think the perspective that I do want to bring is that the perspective I have, the experience I have, is most likely the experience of a lot of young people that we have today in Nigeria. And we do know that the data and stats say that, young people do form majority of Nigeria today. And Nigeria, as it stands, right, the democracy or the governance system that we have is by no means inclusive, is by no means, participatory the way it was designed to be participatory, is in no means fair and equitable. So we have a lot of young people being born into an age of democracy, or being born into, a military regime that was on the cusp of ending, and then being propelled into a democracy. So what that
Uh-oh. Oh dear.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go on.
Okay,
Um,
great. Thank you. So sorry, it tripped off on my end. So I was speaking to the context of history. Oh wow. Hello?
Please go on, Afisa. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to be sure it wasn't my network. Um, to just quickly round up, I was speaking to the context of history and how we do have, a population that doesn't really understand the magnitude of what happened on June 12th and the sacrifices that were paid for, from Chief MKO Abiola to Kudirat Abiola to the different activists who laid down their lives, were sent to prison, to defend Nigeria as it is and defend democracy and the rights of people to participate in government and to have a fair and equitable society. So, I'm really grateful for platforms like this that can include young voices to show their own perspective of the situation, and to, foster a level of intergenerational dialogue where we can still learn from those who, made such laudable sacrifices during that time, and continue to pass on, the message across to our generation and the generations coming after us, because progress is possible, but it is not guaranteed. It is the consistency, the consistent implementation and eternal vigilance that ensures that we have a society that really works for everyone. So I will just stop there. Thank you, everyone.
Wow, thank you so much, Nafisa, for sharing your thoughts, and very, very succinctly put as well. And indeed, there are different generations, there are different people who have their own experiences, have their own thoughts to share. Even though you were 3 months old, I mean, you were still part of this one way or the other, and it's great to have your recollections here. But let me just go forward a little bit. I don't see Ogalanre on the call. Please, as soon as he gets in, kindly let me know. Damilola, thank you so much. But moving forward, let's just talk a little bit about how governments since 1999 continue to shrink the civic space, which is why we're here today. So some have said tools such as and bills such as the CAMA 2020, the FRC code, and all have actually done their bit in shrinking the civic space. Ogajide, can I get back to you on this to just give us a 2-minute reply? What do you think about the government since 1999 doing their bit to shrink the civic space? Over.
Hello? Okay, now I'm on. Thank you for the opportunity. Yes, you recounted some of them. The shrinking civic space is being gradual but steadily. Before the Company and Allied Matters Act
Oh, we've lost him.
Hello, Ogajide? Okay, so it seems we'll get him back on the call, but let me move to you, the great oracle. Do share with us what you think about the shrinking civic space and the thoughts about different laws actually leading to this and helping with this. Go ahead, sir.
First, I think we have to look at what I describe as the political elite mindset, in our country before we look at the institutional and legal frameworks that tend to shrink the civic space. We have an elite political class that is not interested in democratization. That is one. Again, I refer to Ake. Ake insisted that you cannot have democracy if no attempts are made to democratize the political space. Within the spectrum of democracy in Africa, as an idea, I always insist, hasn't failed, but it is the practice that has failed, largely because of the attitude of members of our elite political class. Two, they are products of the mindset of the elite class that we have. Because they are not interested in democracy, they are not interested in democratization, they tend to throw institutional and legal bottlenecks at civil society. Rightly, you've mentioned Kama as one. And two, you also find out that other legislations that restrict freedoms, particularly the right to free speech, are either considered or run through the legislative process of the National Assembly. But the fundamental point we must make, it is not only a Nigerian problem, it has become an African, a wider continental problem. Whether you are in Cameroon, you see what the ruling party is doing to Maurice Kamso of the Cameroon Renaissance movement. Whether you are in Tanzania, you see what the female president, incidentally, President Samia Hassan, has done to Dr. What's his name again? Dr. Tudun Lisu of the Chidama movement. If you go to Ghana, if you go to Togo, you have a poet who is currently in prison. If you go to Algeria, incidentally, you also find a poet, Fosu, I think, who was jailed for giving thumbs up to a public post on the coup in Mali. So we are dealing with a continental African elite political class that is not interested in democratization, that is not interested in democracy. All they are interested in is appropriation of state resources and primitive accumulation, the type that Harold Laswell spoke about, who gets what, when, and how. So for us as a country, we must look beyond this kwashiorkor democracy that we have now and begin to poke some torchlight on the civil rule that we are pursuing. The civil rule will take us to nowhere. It will shrink the democratic space, and we have seen it. In 2012, there was no space for civic gathering in Abuja, where I live and practice law. When Jonathan removed oil subsidy that year, we gathered at the Eagle Square. But of course, for 2 nights we were threatened by officers of the Brigade of Guards, and we moved to a small patch, a green patch, around Transcorp Hotel, the place that is called Unity Fountain. That place became a ground civic gathering. Between 2012 and 2016, the Unity Fountain became the historic point of gathering for protesters in Abuja. Guess what happened in
a
2017?
rallying point.
A play of the devious mindset. Yeah, a play of the devious mindset of our elite political class. General Buhari, who was the president at the time, gave an order for the fencing off of the Unity Fountain. Today, that fountain is occupied by men and women of the Nigerian police force. It speaks to the crisis that we confront ourselves with in our country. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Ogajide Ojoye, you're back right now. And, the great oracle made a mention of the elite political class not interested in democratization and also took it to the larger space of Africa. Do you think that is the situation as we look at the shrinking civic space?
So, like I was saying that before we have Company and Allied Matters Act 2020, which has were part of which targeted civil society organizations and NGOs with certain reporting obligations and the threat to remove leadership if certain things were not done. We have what is called Cybercrime Act 2015, where which has now been weaponized by the military and the security agencies against journalists, against civil society activists, where just criticizing the president or a governor could warrant an arrest and detention and prosecution. We've seen Omoyele Sowore over revolution now being dragged to court, his passport seized. We've seen the NSAS protesters in 2020. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
NSAS protesters in 2020, some of them died, some of them were incarcerated, even when the state denied the killing in Lekki Toll Gate in Lagos. We know that lives were lost, and nobody has been brought to account on the basis of those killings, extrajudicial killings. We've also have the 2024 End Bad Governance and End Hunger protest in many northern Nigeria, including southwest Nigeria, which we saw the underhand tactics and strong tactics that were used to quell those protests. These are civil protests. There were no weapons found on the protesters, but many of them were arrested and clamped into detention. Their accounts were frozen. They were haunted. Some have to go underground. So these are very clear signs of shrinking civic space. Even for those of us who write weekly column, we have to tread very carefully because of fear of reprisal. And you could see even the malicious intent of the state by not recognizing heroes of June 12 who are critics of government. People like Professor Odinkalu was not on that list. Great Oracle is not on that list, even when he nearly lost his life. There are several. Olisa Agbakoba, imagine, Olisa Agbakoba is not on that list. Sowore is not on that list. Everyone that is deemed to be a critic of government were deliberately left out on that honors list. And those who are being given Grand Commander are actually people whom people have pointed fingers at undermining the democratic process just because they hold position of public office, maybe as senators or as governor or as members of the House of Reps. So the true heroes of democracy not being recognized is also to discourage those who may want to take up activism as a way of contributing to nation building. And we should see it in that light. And so all hands have to be on deck. We need to fight this battle both offline and online to make sure that we do not cede our civic space to the military and civilian coupists and civilian junta, because what we have now is like a kind of civilian autocracy.
Interesting that you would mention that, and it's something that we'll definitely need to go back to later on, talking about the heroes of June 12th and the honor, that has been given, or in this case, not given to them. But Nafisa, let me come back to you before I get to Madam Ayo to talk a bit about, NSARS and bad governance. So Ogajide mentioned it. The great oracle mentioned it as well. So how do these protests, these activities, how do they actually reflect the June 12th spirit? And what can young people learn from these, especially for 2027 that has been everywhere, where we're not anywhere near there, but that news has been all over the place. So what can young people learn for 2027 and beyond?
All right, thank you so much for that question. I think the first thing I will go ahead and say is in terms of what can young people learn from, NSAS and bad governance is that ensuring that your country is equitable, fair, and has a level of good governance is a journey and not a sprint. I know a lot of young people went, for the NSAS protests with the hope that this was going to be the mother of all protests. This was going to be a protest that would end everything bad in Nigeria. And it was a rude shock to see, being being tear gassed, being shot at, being beaten by security institutions that were mandated to protect us. I remember my own experience. I'm based in Abuja. And my university didn't exactly have a very vibrant activism culture, which I think is what is which I think is what happens now in universities, unfortunately, and it should not be so. So my first real time protest experience was at the NSAS, the NSAS protest. And I remember that day we walked. I can't remember where we walked from, but we walked from the morning. We walked, we sang, we hitchhiked, we took cars. I was with my friends. We carried backpacks and a whole lot of things. And then we marched to the front of the police headquarters here in Abuja. And I remember we sat down. It was really hot that day. We sat down on the road. We put out wrappers and mats, and then we bought water. And then, we had lots of young people. I remember Aisha Yusufu was with us that day, and we were still there to about 6:30 in the evening. We weren't disruptive. We were quite responsible. And that was when the police officials came out from the headquarters with tear gas and sticks and everything, and they were seizing people. They were slashing the tires of cars. They seized some protesters. The rest of us ran from the front of the police headquarters down into the highway, and that was my first experience, and it was a very traumatizing experience. I later found relief by writing about it. I still went back for more protests. Some that were holding to tackle, the others that were holding in different places. I still want back, because even if it doesn't happen today, it can happen tomorrow. You just have to keep on going back. It's a resilient process. And how the June 12th spirit really reflected itself, in the NSAS and the end bad governance, especially the NSAS, is that, from my own experience, had been dead for a long time. After June 12th and get the military going away and democracy coming into Nigeria in 1999, and civilians basically ruling us from then till now, we had, that student activism spirit wasn't exactly very prevalent. It's student activism spirit that was, an activism spirit that was prevalent on justice and fairness. It wasn't there. And, it found its way, or it found a way to manifest, during the NSAS, protests. And what started from Twitter, from mobilizing on Twitter, on WhatsApp or Telegram groups, it's a new generation. Everyone has learned to evolve with technology, now made it onto the streets in a very massive, way. And it's interesting to note that this happened during the regime of President Muhammadu Buhari, who was once at a time also a military dictator. It just shows you how patterns can replicate themselves in history.
Yeah.
I wasn't alive, when President Muhammadu Buhari was, a military dictator. But I remember my uncles and aunties telling me how they used to line up for things like rice and beans and how things were very bad. Those were things that, frame my own worldview about Nigeria's, history as a nation. So I think that's my submission for that question. So I also don't take too much time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Nafisa. Thanks for your thoughtfulness as well. Just, going through that and reflecting that June 12th spirit, and hopeful that 2027 will actually throw up and beyond will throw up a whole lot, especially for young people. Let me get to you and Madam Ayo with this, and still on young people and young Nigerians. I mean, we have a youth population that is over and beyond what anyone imagines right now. But I'm just wondering what you think about young Nigerians and how they can use constitutional rights under sections 22 and 38 to 40 to defend the civic space and demand accountability. Are Nigerian young people actually ready to do that, to defend the civic space and demand accountability from their leaders? Overman.
Well, I think that it's difficult for me to talk about young people because I'm an old person. I'm not a young person. And,
but I'm sure you have the voice of experience, ma'am, and they can hear from you.
That's a different that's a different thing. I mean, it's one thing to have experience. I mean, I was so encouraged to hear Nafisa talking about or understanding that this is a process, because I do feel that we tend to talk ourselves and the gains that we have made down and to only emphasize what we have lost. And I think that's a shame. I mean, I personally would never say that people not getting national honors discourages other people, discourages Nigerians from struggling for their rights. That's not why people went into the struggle. People went into the struggle because they felt that it needed to be waged. And I think that we need to all understand that the reason behind the saying that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance is not so that we can say, oh, we don't have any liberty, we haven't got any liberty, or things are terrible, but to tell us that what we have, we need to hold it and we need to expand it. And I think that's so important, because otherwise, what are we here for? If all the efforts of civil society, and civil society has been very active, if all those efforts have resulted in nothing at all, then we should go and find another way of doing our business. And I would say that, I mean, I was just reading in the book by Abdul Oro. He recently launched his book, Demonstration of Craze. And I was just reading again the letter that was written by Mahmoud Abdul Haminu, aka Great Oracle, and late Bamidele Aturu. And they wrote a letter from detention where they were kept, and it was titled Before We Die. And I would just want to recommend that letter to them, because they were describing the conditions under which they were being held, under which they were suffering, and yet they were reaffirming their determination that they would not succumb. I'll just read one paragraph. Finally, patriots who are not yet in detention should not relent in the struggle to rid our country, nay, our world, of dictatorships. The hard time is yet to be here. From our discussion with SSS interrogators, it's clear that the state will get increasingly vicious in the next 6 months or so. Friends and patriots in the CLO, CDHR, CRP, the press and academia should be particularly watchful. On our part, we shall be pleased if the struggle for our release is generally linked with the struggle to de-prison Nigeria itself. That was a letter that they wrote in 1991 to the public. And the point that I want to make about that letter is that it recognized that times were tough and that they were likely to get tougher. but they were
Exactly.
people not to give up. And to me, I think that we need to look at that and to other struggles, and to remember that the people that sacrificed then, they felt it's as if we're telling them, all your sacrifice was in vain. Everything you did has amounted to nothing. You didn't build anything. You didn't lay any foundation for us. And I think that is a shame. With regard to honors, and I think I'm going to force myself to read this list now because I may not get another
Please go ahead.
chance.
No,
But
go
when
ahead, ma'am.
and here we go, old age makes one forget things. I addressed the meeting and I said, Mr. President, it is right that Bashorun MK Abiola should receive the honor due to a former president of Nigeria. But Mr. President, we cannot understand the significance of this day if we fail to remember those who gave their lives in the struggle for democracy in Nigeria. Among these are the 96 people slain on the streets of Lagos on 5th July 1993. Kudirat Abiola, also slain on the streets of Lagos on June 4th. Chief Alfred Rewani, Alhaja Suliat Adedeji, Dr. Beko Ransom Kuti, the leader of the Campaign for Democracy, Chima Ubani, seconded by the Civil Liberties Organization to be organizing secretary of CD. Others include Dr. Festus Iyayi, Bamidele Aturu, Olaiton Oyerinde, Emma Ezeazu, Mohammed Sule, Bagauda Kautu, Muhammad Ali Biu, and Oronto Douglas. They did not live to see this day. Now, I did not mention those of us who were alive, who were also involved in the struggle. But
Yeah.
I mean, and I can look at the list that the president prepared and find that of all that long list, only two of us were women, and one of us was dead, and the other one is an elderly person like me. I'm still, thank God, alive. But you can see that it's a list of that nature. It's never going to cover everybody, and it's never going to honor everybody. All we can do is to continue to remind. But it is not because of being on a list of people honored that one should, and I should say, by the way, that Lisa had been awarded an OON for services to the legal profession under General Obasanjo. But I think that we should understand that we need to be convinced ourselves about why we take up these struggles. My mind is that we have got civil rule. I said I would only take part in single issue campaigns after that, such as Bring Back Our Girls, such as End SARS, but not to say, for example, good governance, because it's our duty to insist on the electoral process, the democratic process, to elect people. And let's be very clear, we cannot have a democracy without Democrats. We can't have a democracy without politicians. It's possible that we may have democracy without political parties, but we all know that it's better to see a political party and see it clearly than to pretend that we're not having political parties and then discover that they are actually controlling, that the same people are actually controlling the show. Young people, as Nafisa said, they're in the majority. And as you, Doctor, the moderator has said, they are in the majority. I don't know why they are still waiting for the elderly to but I would say that it's one thing to say that the democracy, but we continue to demoralize ourselves by saying, oh, the elections are not this, the elections, and then we get surprised when people don't. I say, no, we have actually made progress in the business of counting votes and giving the results. We need to on that and encourage people rather than to continually say, there's no point, it's not working, everything is bad. Let's be a bit more energetic about building on what we have and defending what we have rather than throwing it all away with the bathwater, because that is actually the way to military dictatorship. And however much people want to praise the dictators that we have in the Sahel region, the people who are under them have a different story to tell.
Okay, thank you so much, Madam Ayo. I mean, you have said so much, right? Based on your experience and indeed what you expect from younger people. And And this is why I'll throw this to Professor Odinkalu. I know you're in place now. Great to have you here, sir. And I know you have been listening all this while. And I just wonder what you would have to throw in here, particularly looking in retrospect to how it was and how it is right now. Do you expect so much more from younger people, from the Nigerian youth? What was your experience then, and when you look at it right now, what do you see? Great to have you join us, sir. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Inya. And by the way, please accept my apologies first for joining late. I was in transit from the airport, and the reception was just diabolical. But secondly, also, if I may, can I also please convey my condolences on the passing of your dad? I just learned of it, actually.
Thanks.
Dr. Daba was a remarkable, remarkable man. May his soul rest in peace.
Amen. I appreciate it, sir.
Let me, a lot has been said, at least the bits I could listen to, and I'm really glad that Madam President Ayobe is here, and also I'm glad that Abdul Mahmoud Aminu is here, Great Oracle. I think it's, the risks that people took and the sacrifices that they made in those years under military rule can easily be overlooked. I cannot speak highly enough of these two people. But not just because they're here, but even if they were not here, I would still do that. The risks that they took at the personal level, at the professional level, mind you, Mr. Bill was a lawyer, and Mahmoud was coming to the bar, and the effort that it took to get him to the, he has not described, he's described, I think, I've listened to some of the stuff that happened in detention, where I was privileged to find them on a visit to some other people, but described the effort that it took to get him to the bar, which is another story altogether, and to see the and also Bamidele Aturu. And I'm glad also that we've therefore paid tribute to all of those people. And for me, anybody who is honored for doing that, I think we should celebrate that fact. And rather than harp on this person didn't get it, none of us, nobody went into that thing to get an honor. It was about our communities, our lives, our country. And I think we should focus on that. National honor or no national honor is irrelevant, but I think that all of those who were honored deserve acknowledgement and honor. And I'm not going to stand here or sit here or listen to anybody cavil at the recognition that they have received. About young people, I can only say this. There's a tendency for each generation to look at its experience as unique. And in a sense, when my generation came of age under military rule, we also did. But I was fortunate to read Bola Ige's recent memoirs, People, Politics, and Politicians of Nigeria, 1995 highly recommend generation. Because it tells you one thing. Ige complained at the point when he was coming of age in the 1950s that they were excluded by the older people, that the older people were taking exactly the same kinds of complaints that we hear today, and the same kinds of complaints that my own generation made. And I'm glad we're having an intergenerational conversation, and the generational exceptionalisms that we tend to inflict on these conversations could benefit from a lot more respect for each generation and for the experiences and challenges that each generation has got to confront. I'd stop here. The one other person I think I'd like to mention in this is Rotimi Sankore. In my generation, we knew Rotimi. But Rotimi died sadly last year of cancer. And you know, the sacrifice that people like that made, I think we should always underscore and celebrate. Let me stop here.
Thank you so much, Prof, for sharing your thoughts and adding your voice to this conversation. But Ogajide, let me throw this to you right now as it relates to the media. I mean, this title you gave yourself, Aros, okay, Asorobai, am I right? I hope I got that right. Because you are everywhere speaking about issues that relate to governance and justice and politics and getting it right. So let me ask if I mean about the role journalists actually played during the June 12th struggle and how that legacy can actually inspire press freedom today.
Thank you, Iya, my sister. I guess it's been said by many of us on the panel, because you can actually not diverse activists and journalists. You know, among the activists, we have those who are journalists, those who are lawyers, those who are even lawyer and journalists simultaneously, the unionists, those who belong to the Nigerian Labour Congress at that time, and several other student movements who play very critical role. And so, of course, when you look at the liberal definition of civil society, you will find a confluence among even labor unions, the NGO community, and then even the journalists, because particularly for those who are not for profit. So for me, the efforts of people like Kule Ajibade that I mentioned earlier, who was jailed for life by the Abacha regime, people, even John Kayode Fayemi, who was also the barricade, you know, as a very young journalist then, went on to become governor, minister, you know, everything. Professor Odinkalu has been writing, just like myself, for many years. He's taking on judicial reform as a life battle to reform the judiciary. Many of us have found the convenience of using the instrumentality of writing gift, like the great oracle himself, trying to straddle, because sometimes I find it difficult. Where exactly do I belong? Am I a journalist? Am I just a writer? Am I in the civil society? Am I even an activist? Or I'm just a social communicator? But it's everything rolled into one. The most important thing is that we are only fixated in getting our society to be better. This is my 5th engagement today. 6th. I've done 5 media interviews today before 12 noon. And this webinar is my 6th official engagement today. But you know, it's all about not giving up on your country. Madam President, congratulations on your 78th recently, and then the award. You know, I haven't had time to do that before today. You know, it's not easy when you see even the liberation struggle, the struggle for independence, journalists played very critical role. The same way as unionists, people like Pa Michael Imodu and the rest of them did play a role in getting us independence. The same way they got us out of the military hunter. And now we are trying to deepen civic engagement, the civil society, the media, we still have to lead the pack, because whether we like it or not, we've got no other country. I gave an African Report interviewed me about 2 hours ago, and we were talking about restriction of visa, expanding the visa restriction by the Trump administration. And I said, well, if our own countries have been livable, why do anybody want to go to US in the first place? Why can't we have a country that everybody will be proud of and where we will live and get our aspiration? So the journalists and the media community, we still need to play very critical role. And Dr. Iya, one good thing is that the media space is now liberalized. there is now the social media component with several platforms to engage. And even traditional media have had to go online. Even if you are a print media, you have to go online now to be relevant, to stay relevant. And we have all online media space like Premium Times, spearheaded by Dapo Olorunyomi, who incidentally is also on that honors list. Unless I've been misconstrued about people getting honor and not getting honor, I'm not by any stretch of imagination saying that people should go into struggle or into activism so that they can be recognized or honored. But I was just doing a comparison between people who are today honored, that it's not people who actually deserve to be honored that are majorly being recognized. Why would even a government like that of Tinubu be malicious to exclude people who justifiably should be recognized and honored? It's not as if you can use the honor to draw money at any bank, but at least let your struggle not be in vain. Let that recognition come to you that you also pay the price. What I mean, it's not only to die, people should be recognized. So the media, coming back to that, the media has a lot of role to play. Section 22, Section 39, Section 40 of our Constitution has put every responsibility on the Nigerian press and the media. And we will continue to play that. The media space is expanding more. Even now, we have community radio, or like in time past, so many community radio, campus radio that are now springing up. Almost every university that is offering mass communication now is establishing campus radio, and we can use the instrument of that plurality to engage for the expansion of the civic space.
All right. Thank you so much, Ogajide, for your contribution. I see that Mr. Lanre Arogundade has also joined in. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. I don't know if you have been listening to the conversation, but it will also be great to get your thoughts, especially as it relates to the media's role then and now, and what exactly the role journalists played during the June 12th struggle, and of course, what their legacy inspires and how this inspires press freedom for us today. Ogalare, can you just speak to this briefly? Thank you.
Sorry, can you quickly rephrase your question for me? Sorry.
Okay, great to have you here again. So just talking about the role journalists play during the June 12th struggle and how their legacy can actually inspire press freedom today.
Well, I think the media as a whole played very commendable role during June 12th at the level of institutions and at the level of individual journalists. And I would even say that we had journalists, even in government-owned media, who identified with the struggle. And I guess this is part of the documentation that we have to do. I know we had an editor in New Nigeria, which is owned by the federal government at that time, that identified with the struggle, and that cost him his job one way or the other. So we still need to do a lot of documentation. But when you look at the private media and the journalists working there, it was like the media took a common stand that the military should go and June 12 should stand. And it also extends even to media organizations. I recall, for example, that the Nigerian Union of Journalists under Ladi Lawal as president actually became a member of some of the pro-democracy groups. NUJ was part of JACON, Joint Action Committee on Nigeria, led by Chief Gani Fawemi, for example, and Campaign for Democracy. And I do recall that when I later became the chairman of the Nigerian Union of Journalists in Lagos in 1995, I was attending those meetings as representing the NUJ. So that's a level. Then you had media institutions that, because of their stories, their reports, their editorials, were shut down. And those journalists who broke the barrier of reporting, some of them ending up being tried by military tribunal. For some of the media organizations too, it was also commitment to professionalism during that period. You talk of National Concord, where I was working at the time of June 12 elections as features editor. It was that kind of commitment, and that's why one felt that in recognizing the heroes of June 12, the female in the media too should have a place there. Presently, Donya Abiola, for example, was the managing director of an editor-in-chief of Concord. And it wasn't just that she was Abiola's wife, it was also that she stood for independent media, she stood for the right of media to report June 12, and Concord was kind of shut down. So we're talking of enormous sacrifices, really. I hope that we would have many more. We have many more documentations of what happened in that period for us to be able to properly situate their place in history. I guess I could quickly mention some of the extreme cases that probably people have forgotten about quickly. We had some extreme cases. I probably we probably talked about that of Dakpolo Yomi, who the military wanted to grab, was not available, managed to escape, and then they arrested the wife and the 3-month-old son. Then there is the case of a Bumi Aborishade, who decided, because the media was being assaulted, the news tempo, they've gone underground, boldly decided to publish a newspaper which he called June 12 magazine. And of course, they went after him. As at the time he was escaping from the country, the wife was pregnant. He had to go into exile in Ghana, so he wasn't even around by the time the wife delivered and so on. And then along that line, let me also quickly mention the example of Niran Malalu, who was picked up for alleged coup plot and was detained for a long period of time, and who, as at the time he was also being detained, the son was just a few months old. So these are kind of stories that I think should essentially inspire the younger generation of journalists that we should use the instrumentality of our reporting to defend democracy, knowing the sacrifices that we made to get to this point.
Thank you so much, Ogalanre, for sharing your thoughts on this very important point you have raised, highlighting the good stories and also highlighting those that were not so palatable, but happened all the same. And the point you mentioned about documenting the experiences is so, so important, particularly for generations to come, so they know that this actually happened. Younger Nigerians need to know that these things happen. But let's talk a little bit. I know Professor Dinkalu mentioned something about this earlier, but then we talk about Professor Humphrey Moses and his contributions, and of course what happened very recently, where a posthumous honor was given to him. So let's talk about the heroes. We have talked about it over and over again in different ways, but how should the heroes be honored? Because there is actually no spotlight on this. We have a long list. Madam Ayo has a list. Mr. Larry has a list. Mr. Abdul, you have your list. Professor Dinkalu has his. How should these heroes be honored? Let's start with you, the great orator.
Okay. Well, okay. So the first point to make is that it will be difficult to. Oh, okay, the question is not for me.
Yeah, Ogalare, I'll come back to you on this. I actually wanted the great.
Sorry. Okay.
Sorry
about
that.
Okay. All right. Let me comment. First, I have a person deeply anti-honor principle that I hold on to very the honor and the award system. But given my principled personal position, I congratulate those who have been honored, who have been given award. A lot of us do not know, and I put this in the public space. As a delegate to the National Conference in 2014, we were approached by the Office of the Permanent Secretary in charge of National Honors at the National Conference, and we were asked to submit our names. I declined. Some of my colleagues did. They were given honors, and some of them, again, in a very offensive way, organized big parties across Abuja to celebrate the national honors. I believe that whatever sacrifices we, it's for the progress and growth of humanity. Whatever we do, our name should stand in the stead for us when we go ahead. That's one. Two, I also want to respond to the issue of youth contribution to the ongoing struggle in our country. I'm 56, I'm 57 later in the year, and in the context of Nigeria, I'm one of the youths. You know, when you find people in their 50s being called youths, you know, in our country, and by my politics, I straddle two generations. I try to identify with Nigerian youths because I am of the opinion that beacons of struggle can only be maintained if we relate new struggles to older struggles, and that's why I'm involved. The protest Nafisa referred to at the forecourt of the Nigerian police, you know, spoke to the inadequacy in terms of knowledge of Nigerian youth at the time. I joined the protest under bridge in Bega and organized them through the street of Abuja to Banex to the Unity Fountain. At the Unity Fountain, we disagreed on what next. I told them, by my understanding of the post-colonial crisis of the Nigerian state, a state that is violent, that is largely exclusionary, that seeks to control the lives of our citizens, it will be suicidal if they march and go and occupy the force headquarters. It was late in the day. At about 5:55 or thereabout, I left. Subsequently, at about 6:15, I got a call somewhere as I was approaching my office in Wuse Zone 6 at the time from Dayo, who is the executive director of international something reporting and all that, that people were being tear gassed. I came back, we rescued those we could rescue. But the point I want to make here, and Bamidele Atura and I highlighted it in our letter before we die. Look, there's an historical context to that letter. I had the fortune of being in the same cell with Umana Umana, a Nigerian businessman who was arrested by the military and detained in Kirikiri prison at the time for pyramid scam. And because he was a wealthy Nigerian at the time, he had access to all sorts of privileges. And because I was his cellmate, I also enjoyed some of these privileges, particularly having access to writing materials. So Atura and I agreed that we should put out a statement, and they asked me to do the statement. I was young. I was 22 years, 8 months old at the time, deeply Marxian in my outlook, and I filled the letter with Marxist labels and Marxist slogans. And Atura said, look, why a crisis of the Nigerian state? It is important that we highlight the very prison conditions that we were facing at the time. and connecting it to the larger struggle outside the prison. We argued for a full day before we agreed to have that letter that we sent through Umana's contact to CLO. I thank Abdul for releasing the letter. It has taken me 12 years since I began writing my memoir to find that letter, and I haven't found it.
Yeah.
I will look at Abdul's book and, of course, reproduce that. Again, my comrade, Odinkalu made mention of my experience, and in connecting my experience to the present fault lines that we suffer in our country, I was denied call to the Nigerian bar in 1993 by a Yoruba DG who has now gone ahead, simply because when SSS came to arrest me at the Nigerian Law School at the time, law students, for the first time, conservative law students, resisted my arrest, and he felt insulted. I didn't fail my bar part 2 exams, but he ensured that the body of benchers did not come into the bar. When I was eventually called to the bar in June 1994, in fact, it was only last year that I got to know that an Igbo senior advocate of Nigeria, who was chairman of the body of benchers at the time, ensured that I should be called to the Nigerian bar. That's the special piece of history that, with thanks to Odinkalu, that we are aware of at the moment. But my message to Nafisa, it's very important. It's very important. Nafisa,
very briefly,
we need to understand the post-colonial crisis of the Nigerian state. The Nigerian state is rooted in colonial legacy, designed for control rather than inclusion. It has failed to evolve from its post-colonial character to a democratic state. So don't expect that in any protest, the state will treat you with kid gloves. It will not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, the great Oracle, for sharing your thoughts on that. I mean, we are actually running out of time, so I hope that we can get all your thoughts in before we go on. But moving on right now, I know you would all wanted to have a take on the forgotten electoral heroes, but moving on to technology and protecting the civic space. So how can this happen, and how can technology actually enhance voter participation ahead of the 2027 elections? Nafisa, would you want to say something on that?
Me?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much. So regarding technology, right, and how technology and innovation and how... Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So regarding technology and innovation and how we can use that to, power, the more a more efficient and inclusive way for a lot of people to engage in democracy today, I think the critical point is inclusiveness. What technology has done, online platforms and innovation, is that it has opened up a world of participation that originally wasn't there before. So for instance, if you wanted to engage in an online match, you had to be there in person. If you wanted to do certain things or engage in civic activity, you had to be there in person. What technology has done is that it has opened up that space, democratized access to be able to engage in civic action without you even leaving where you are, or literally in your bedroom. Yes, it has its dangers. Yes, it has the downsides to it, but I would like to focus more on the opportunities than focus on the disadvantages of allowing technology and innovation to, take part in our electoral processes. Like, for example, let's take IRA, for example. I remember when we went prior to the 2023 elections, we went for a market drive. So we went into the markets in Abuja trying to get people to vote. And if I remember correctly, that was the height of the Buhari administration implementing the reform for Naira scarcity. And, a lot of people were just really discouraged. People were saying, I remember going to a market woman's shop, and she had a customer who was crying and saying she doesn't have money to go home. And the woman who owned the store rather, had to give the lady, a customer, I don't even know what to call her now, some funds in order for her to go home. Please excuse me. Sorry, I have a 3-year-old toddler at home, so she tends to run about sometimes. Yes. So basically, right, most of the how I put it, call to action points and encouraging futures of getting them to engage to vote on the day was that IREF is going to be in place. Electoral reform had just gone through. That was led by Honorable Ario Dari at Ario. Unfortunately, he's late now, but his leadership was very key in driving electoral reforms at that time. And then we were saying, through IRF, you're going to be able to monitor the votes coming from your local government, subnational level, etc. and everything. And they were like, really, is this something that's going to happen? Because, education is a thing, right? A lot of people don't really pay attention or read, especially people within the rural areas, not even talk about peri-urban or urban areas. And, that was the future of technology, innovation. It makes it more accessible. It makes things more transparent. Yes, it could also be used to sabotage, but like I said, let's focus on the advantages. And going into the 2020 elections, IRS shut down. They were using pen and paper to malign everything. Obviously, it was a mockery of what the reforms and the agitations that a lot of civic space actors have done.
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you. So, I to be honest, technology and innovation is here to stay. And we can only figure out how to move forward and, use those as tools, whether it's in organizing, whether it's in implementing reforms, whether it's in, driving fair and transparent processes in civic and electoral processes. And then I think the last thing I was going to say, because I do realize there was some feedback directed to me from the previous speakers as well. There's something that Professor Chidi Odinkalu said, and he said, as sometimes as generations, I think on both ends, sometimes we tend not to acknowledge or respect, people's experiences, knowing that they deal with different Nigerias at different times. And that was very profound to me. And I think that, I might just end with that. It's a lesson for me, and I think it should be a lesson for everyone. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Nafisa, for sharing. I know Prof. and Professor Dinkalu and the great Oracle are very, very hands-on on social media. Yes, Ogajide as well. All hands-on on social media, on Twitter, or X, as the case may be, and sharing their thoughts and opening up conversations and all of that. But what next, really? We're gradually winding down right now to what next, what strategies do we have really to defend the civic space? Professor Dinkalu, let me begin with you and then I'll pass on to Mr. Abdul Mahmoud. Professor.
Yeah, thanks a lot. What strategies? By the way, just one sentence on the issue about heroes. The chair of it's important to mention names, particularly for when it is for good reason. The chair of the body of benchers who ensured that people like the Great Oracle and Chimo Kereke got admitted to the Nigerian bar was a man called Chief GCM Onyuke, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. And that was a time when people stood up for things that mattered, irrespective of where you come from or where people come from. And today I sit down and I see, and that's why for many of the people here who come from that generation, these conversations these days we have about where this person comes from, where they worship and all of that are very off-putting. And that is why I insist on staying on platforms like Twitter, X, or whatever they are called. They're full of mad people. But we cannot cede the space to just all the mad people who don't have a clue the amount of sacrifice that people have made. So even if I don't agree with somebody like Miss Ayobe or Great Oracle, there are things I cannot say about them. There are things I am forbidden from saying about them because I know they have made sacrifice with blood on those in making our country work. And I want to encourage younger people. These days, everything is like fast food, right? And so you can unfriend anybody anyhow and all of that. And because of that, the constraints on misbehavior and infamous conduct are no longer there. But let's remember, actually, that there are things this thing is about addition, not subtraction. Building a country is about addition. And if we cannot add, the country is destroyed. Secondly, and maybe some people will even think this is in contradiction to what I've said. If you're going to build a country, you have to sustain the capacity for civic grudge. Let me repeat myself. If you are going to build a country, you have to sustain the capacity for civic grudge. Deep memory is important. You know, and that's one thing we miss. And pastors will tell you, forgive and forget. In Benue State, our people are being slaughtered, massacred, and we will forgive and forget. In this other place, our sisters will be raped, forgive and forget. You've got to get to the point where you must insist, I will not forgive and I will not forget. We will seek redress by any means. I personally will not forgive Nasir El-Rufai, for instance, for what he has done on Southern Kaduna. That is my personal decision. Okay? I will chase him until the day I die. And if he chases me until the day he dies, he's welcome to do so. But everyone must keep a capacity for a grudge. That is the only way you stop politicians from coming back after they've destroyed the place. Senior politicians know how to keep a grudge. We've got to learn from them. I'll stop there.
Wow. That's quite something. Thank you so much, Professor Odinkalu, for sharing that. Sustain the capacity for civic growth. Great oracle. Let's have your thoughts on what next. What steps can young people, civil society actually take to reclaim the civic space and protect democracy?
What next for me? One thing which, again, for me is quite fundamental, is that we must learn to be teachable. I know people of my generation who are not internet compliant, who are not on any social media platform, and who are very revolutionary in their spirit, that sometimes I ask them, who do you want to send your revolution to when nobody knows what you have on your mind? Nobody has had what for you is important for our society. That is at that one level. And true, this generation of youth, I salute them. The repressive economic conditions they are facing, lack of jobs. For some of us, when we were called to the bar, we did our national service. I never had the opportunity of staying at home for a month. Immediately I finished my national service, I was absorbed into Allah Kabasharo's chambers, and almost immediately he took ill and everything went into disarray in his law firm. I proceeded to Michael Zegome's chambers, and subsequently I was pushed by CLO and sent to Djibouti. Today, hardly will any young avail himself the opportunities that I had at that historic point in time. But given the circumstances they found themselves, they must also learn to be teachable. The struggle does not begin and ends as a hashtag. Learn to understand the creed and credo of the streets, the sass and music of the streets, and of the streets themselves. This is what I found lacking in the youths today. Again, I refer to that protest of 2020, when a motley crowd gathered under the bridge at Bega. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to do. What they were interested in taking, what they were interested in doing was taking personal selfies until I arrived. My office then was about 10 minutes walk, within the circle of Wuse Zone 6. Got a few of them. This girl, she was my client. I represented her family during the NSAS tribunal in the southeast in Oka, who was at the head of the organization at it. And I told her what to do. We organized ourselves into bands and marched across the streets, Okay. Marching across the streets, these youths never had knowledge of protests that would ginger us to join the march. So the point I'm essentially making, technology is important, but we must also connect the virtual, to the physical. Again, all right. I don't denounce that because in the past, I want to make this point. In the past 15 years, there have been 2 landmark protests, in our annals. The 2012 protest on the removal of oil subsidy and the 2020. And the contributions of Nigerian youth to both protests were profound. I continue to salute them.
Thank you so much, the great Oracle, for sharing your thoughts. What next? What strategies do we have? What can youth and civil society do? Madam Ayo, would you want to share a thought on?
Yeah, I think listening to Nafisa, I actually realized one of the problems, because they went to encourage people to vote by telling them about IREV. But IREV is a results viewing platform. It's not the means by which election results are compiled. And so to see that be, yes, it is very important because it encourages people to check the results from their own station. But to also at the same time condemn the use of paper and pen, that's the primary means by which election results up till tomorrow are assessed, are compiled. So I think that it's very important that when we carry the message to the general public, it's important that we ourselves are very well informed about what we are trying to encourage people with. My view is that whatever the system, whatever the thing, whether it's going to be counted, first go and cast it. And I will always press that message. Go and cast your vote. Then you can complain it hasn't been casted. But the one vote that will never be counted is the one that you never cast. So the way to continue is to continue pressing at the door. I always tell people, I call my NEPA, eco-electricity person every day. And sometimes I get light, sometimes but now they know that this one will call Boya, we should just give her. And so when they see that everybody is there voting and doing their thing, and then they say, there are some things we're not going to get away with. This buying of votes and selling of votes that we've been doing is not going to work because they've all turned up. They filled up all the 500 names on the list by turning up in person and voting. Oh, that plan of ours has gone. But when we tell ourselves it's not going to count and we get the wrong information, whatever it is that we use to get people, the first thing we need to tell them is that go and vote. And yes, it may or may not be counted, but I believe that first is the least investment and is the smallest one that we need to make. Sometimes it does come with peril, yes, but it's the one that we can try and do and build on it. I believe that there is something to build on, and I believe we and the people who are coming behind us, to whom the baton has been passed, and from whom the baton, some may be snatching the baton from people who are still insisting on running the whole race, carrying the baton by themselves. You have to snatch it from them. They will take the baton and they will run with it. I'm very confident of that.
Thank you so much, Madam Ayo, for your confidence. And indeed, there is so much to take home. I'm sure that we have a lot of young people who are on this call and are already, just looking at this. And that point you made about just go out, just go and vote. You may do that first step and see what happens afterwards. Uncle Jide, would you have something to share on the next steps, just for 2 minutes?
Thank you. For me, as an election, expert, I will put a rider to what Madam Ayobe just said about the need for us to engage the electoral process, work for transparent elections, fight political corruption, as well as strategize. There is a popular saying of, I think, Dr. Tajuddin, forgotten the other name, who says, stop agonizing, organize. We need to organize against electoral east in 2027, and even before 2027, there's a forthcoming Anambra governorship election this year in November 8th. There will be two governorship election in 2026 in Osun and in Ekiti. Before 2027, we need to engage the electoral reform process, not just the legal reform, but even attitudinal reform. We do have this very cynical attitude to reforms in Nigeria. And that's why I wrote in my column in The Punch 3 weeks ago about the need for ethical revolution. We need to reform ourselves and, have a positive vibes to our advocacy. It's out of cynicism that many of us have stayed away from election, whereas some of us are pushing for democratization of the electoral process. Earlier today, in one of the interviews I granted, I was asked why there is voter apathy. And I said there will always be voter apathy because we have not even democratized and expanded the voting methods and techniques. In other times, we have early voting, we have provision for prisoners to vote, we have out-of-country voting, we have diaspora voting, we have elections held between 10 hours to 12 hours in US. But in Nigeria, we have only 6 hours. We still shut down the economy because of election. All of these are why there is apathy during elections, apart from good governance, lack of good governance. So, for me, I will always say, let's push for more reforms, expansion of the civic space in the electoral process. Let there be political inclusion, women participation, affirmative action. Those are the next steps for me, so that we can have better governance in future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ogajide. Valerie, just very briefly, next steps for you on making things. Mr. Larry Arogundade. Okay. Hello, Mr. Larry, are you here? Okay, so it looks like he's away for just a few minutes, but I'm sure we'll have him back soon. But then we got a question from someone earlier who shared this, and it's in relation to all we have been talking about so far. And he said, let's see now, is Nigeria still a country after what happened in River State? That's a question for the great oracle.
Of course, it's still a country, please.
I actually saw the question.
Okay.
I'm rather confused by it. Nigeria is still a country. Sometimes in my engagement in the public space, particularly on Twitter, and I think I've written 2 think pieces on it. Nigeria as it is a country, but Nigeria is not a nation. I even find some of these think errors, in public columns of our country. Nigeria is not a nation. Nigeria is comprised or constitutive of multiplicity of nations that are largely political and ethnic and cultural. Again, another think error that I find in the public space as well is this claim that Nigeria is a nation state. Nigeria is not a nation state. Nigeria is a state nation. Perhaps, given the opportunity some other time, we'll look at some of these distinctive notions and concepts in the social sciences.
We really need
to give clarity to them.
We really, really need to. I guess that would be another roundtable conversation we would have on this matter. But I mean, we have very little time to share questions or comments, so you can share yours with us right now. Just post on the group chat and we'll definitely see it. I know a number of people have been sharing their thoughts and just appreciating the panelists and all that has been shared.
Madam Moderator, may I just say with regard to my instant reaction to that thing, is that we need to avoid the temptation to feel that once things don't go our way, whether it's in an election, whether it's in some governmental process or whatever, that we have to throw everything and say it doesn't exist. We need to challenge at every
So sorry, madam.
we can challenge. So if we can do that, rather than, because if the question is Nigeria still a country, it may the things that are happening certainly are not palatable to many people. And many people will say that because of that, they will withdraw, but others will say, because of that, I will challenge, and I will continue to challenge, and I will continue to press, because under the Constitution, I have certain rights and I intend to exercise them. So I want to encourage people to take the view that there are tools that they can use. There are ways that they can set about enforcing and having their rights recognized, and that we should not throw up our hands in despair and say, this didn't work, therefore nothing works. There's always a way through.
I really appreciate that note of hope that you shared, man. Okay, Mr. Larry, could you just hold on? Thank you. I like that note of hope that you have shared, ma'am. And it's something that a lot of young people actually need to hear over and over and over again. But as we wind down on this conversation, is Nigeria today, after the fighting, after being in the trenches, after everything that you have been through, being on the streets and fighting for this democracy, is Nigeria today what you envision? Madam Ayo, let me begin with you.
No, it's not. But the point about democracy is that that's how you choose the people who you think will lead you to where the Nigeria that you want. That's the point of democracy itself. It's not the alpha and omega. I always say, even in Norway, they have elections. And some of us think of Norway as a kind of El Dorado, well-run, well-governed, looking after its people. And yet, somebody comes up and says, what this government is doing is not good enough. I can do better. Vote for me. And so that is what we need to listen to. The people who say, I can do better. This is why I can do better. Vote for me. And it's a 4-year contract. If they don't do better, then you can't vote for the next person that can do better. So please, it is not the country I love. It's not where Nigeria is definitely not where I want it to be. But I think that we need to make sure that we remain on the road to getting ourselves there.
Professor Dinkalu, very briefly, sir, 1 minute. Is Nigeria what you envisioned? Is this what you fought for? I know you're still fighting for it.
Well, that's what exactly I wanted to say. Fought is past tense. Look, this is both present continuous and has to be present continuous tense, even if it feels like future impossible tense, right? It's got to be both, because if one generation finishes everything that's to be done, what will the next generation do? And we are not. This is not an island inhabited by Robinson Crusoe. We're in a world, and the world we interact with the rest of the world, and we all experience the same things in different ways across the world. But there's a point I'll end with, which is a point that the great oracle made. The post-colonial state is our problem. State building is our challenge. All the little things that we are fighting over are small. But the state building project has got to continue. And it is not just a Nigerian thing, it is an African challenge. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Dinkalu. The great oracle, you mentioned some regrets earlier. Are you going to stick with those regrets or look forward in hope?
At a personal level, I'm happy. I'm happy with my country. I can't choose no other country, but that does not in any way extinguish the fact that my country is facing fundamental crisis that challenges its existence. That's one. Two, I have regret about the outcome of 1999, 10 years of our struggle that has culminated in this civil rule. Madam President made mention about choice. We do not have a democratic process that allows for choice, and sometimes we blame some of the actors, but at times I look at some of my comrades who had the patience of mind in 1999 to enter the democratic fray. The question I posed to them, and a lot of them I have civic grudge against them, particularly the individual from our fold who functioned under Professor Mahmoud's leadership of INEC. Whatever platform I find him, I attack him, and I don't hold back. But the fundamental point is this: our comrades who enter the democratic process ended up more anti-democratic than the right-wingers, within the democratic process itself. You look at Edo State, there was nothing Adams did to grow. That was terrible. Local government elections were rigged by somebody with some pretentious attachment, to democracy. Today, if you look at the National Assembly, someone who was detained with me at Intercell, who I had the fortune of inheriting the leadership of National Association of Nigerian Students, Bamdele Opeyemi, is doing all sort of nonsense as a senator of the Federal Republic. I'm not happy with the outcome of democracy. This is not
definitely not what you fought for. Definitely, this is not what you envisioned. But then I'll still hold on to Madam Ayo's thoughts on a hopeful end and looking forward in hope. And as you have all said, we need to learn to be teachable. We need to carry the message, the right message to the public. And we also need to engage the electoral process to ensure that things are right. In all that we have said so far, I do believe that there is hope, and I do believe that all of us need to work together to see that hope come to pass. And this is just one platform of organizing. It's not about agonizing. I know Ogajide mentioned that, and that statement actually came from Mr. Tajuddin Abdurrahim, who mentioned this years ago before he passed, saying, don't agonize, organize. And having this intergenerational conversation with Nafisa, with the great oracle, with Mr. Ayo Obe, with Mr. Larry Arugundade, and of course with Mr. Jide Ojo, definitely is a way to organize and help us think again about honoring the past and securing the future. I would like to say thank you to the guests for being a part of this today. It has been eye-opening. It has been a learning curve. And we only hope and pray that this doesn't end here, but in our various platforms, we'll spread this message of being what we want might be. I'd like to hand over right now to Edosa. Edosa will be sharing the closing remarks at this point. Edosa, I hope you're here. Or is it Damilola? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Inya. Thank you. I think you've actually shared all the thoughts we wanted to share in this closing. Thank you so much for the beautiful moderation. Let me sincerely thank all our distinguished speakers and panelists today. Madam Ayobe, thank you so much for creating the time to join us, ma'am. Professor Chidi Odekalu, thank you very much. Mr. Abdul Mahmoud, I appreciate you, sir. Oganlare, thank you so very much. Of course, my big uncle, Mr. Jide Ojo, thank you. And Nafisa, thank you for joining us. Thank you for the depth of insights and the reflections you have said today. I think everyone agrees. I'm looking at the chat on the webinar. I'm seeing all the chat, all the beautiful chat, and everything everyone is saying. Everyone agrees that this was quite insightful and this was quite a deep sharing. Thank you so much. And thank you for helping us to imagine the future, with renewed hope, though not the kind of renewed hope we are currently hearing in this, the presentation is singing, but thank you for giving us that kind of hope this afternoon. We hope that everyone here that be part of this will be able to carry the spirit of today's conversation into our various spaces and spheres of influence to ensure that these hard-won freedoms of the past are not only preserved but strengthened for the present and of course future generations. So thank you again, and on behalf of the Executive Director of Global Rights, Abiodun Bayewu, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to a continuous collaboration in building, a more democratic institutions and a just country that we call our own, or proudly call our own Nigeria. Thank you again, Dr. Ina, and thank you everyone, and God bless everyone.
Thank you so much, Edosa, and thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we look forward to more conversations to make our country better. Thank you. Bye.